It was a dark, starless night when Daniel disappeared. The 20-something had gone for a walk in the woods surrounding the small village, ignoring his friends' warnings about the whispers. Those who went into the woods at night rarely returned the same, if at all. Concerned, Lucas, Marta, and Enrique, Daniel's close friends, gathered at Marta's house to discuss the disappearance. "He must be out there somewhere," Lucas said, trying to sound optimistic. Enrique, however, seemed unconvinced. What if the whispers got him? The tension in the air was palpable. None of them wanted to believe the old stories, but they knew the woods hid something dark. The next day, at sunset, the trio prepared to enter the forest. Equipped with flashlights, knives, and forced courage, they headed toward where Daniel had last been seen. The trail seemed peaceful, but an aura of unease seemed to surround them. The wind blew lightly, but there was a subtle sound that could only be described as whispering. As they walked deeper into the forest, the trees closed in on them like dark guardians. Strange symbols began to appear etched into the trees, markings that Henry recognized from books about ancient rituals. "This is not good," he muttered, as the others looked around, worried. Suddenly, Marta heard something. A soft whisper, like someone calling her name. "Did you hear that?" she asked nervously. Lucas shook his head, but Henry stopped and looked around, alert. "We are being watched," he whispered, feeling the heavy air around him. The walk continued, and the whispers grew clearer, more insistent. They seemed to come from every direction, but no one knew exactly where. Lucas, normally the bravest, began to sweat. He felt a presence nearby, something he could not see, but knew was there. Without warning, the lights of their flashlights flickered, and Marta disappeared. She had been beside them a moment before, and now there was no sign of her. "Marta!" Henry shouted, running down the path in search of her. But there were no tracks, no sign of a struggle, just silence, broken only by whispers in the distance. Lucas and Enrique looked at each other, panic rising. They knew they had to find her, but the whispers made each step heavier, each decision harder. "We're being hunted," Enrique said, looking around desperately. "This isn't normal. This forest, it wants us." The whispers seemed to know everything about them. Enrique began to hear familiar voices, voices of people he had lost in the past, each one whispering secrets and regrets he was trying to forget. The voices mocked him, echoing his failures, his sins. He fell to his knees, his hands shaking, as Lucas tried to bring him back to reality. Lucas, in turn, began to hear his own mother, who had passed away years before. She called to him, as if she were close by. The whisper played with his memories, manipulating his emotions. He found himself paralyzed, torn between the desire to see his mother again and the fear that this was a trap. Enrique, fighting against the visions, stood up and decided that the only way to survive was to leave the forest, leaving Marta and Daniel behind. But before he could make any decision, the whispering grew louder, more penetrating. He felt something pulling him deeper into the forest, as if the earth itself was trying to swallow him. Meanwhile, Marta, lost in the forest, wandered aimlessly. The voices she heard were different, softer, but equally disturbing. They spoke of sacrifices and destinies, of the need to leave something behind. Each step seemed to lead her deeper into a nightmare from which she could not escape. Lucas tried to find Enrique, but there was no sign of him anymore. He was alone now, surrounded by the whispers that seemed to take shape, murmuring secrets about his future, about his own death. Desperate, he ran, trying to escape, but the forest was a labyrinth with no way out. In a moment of lucidity, Lucas remembered the old tales of the village, stories about the entity that inhabited the forest. Those who entered at night had to offer something in exchange for their freedom. Unsure if it was true or not, he decided he would have to make a sacrifice. In the center of the forest, in a clearing lit by the moonlight, Lucas found a small hut covered in moss and twigs. Inside was an ancient altar, with remains of bones and personal belongings scattered around. The whispers led him there. "What are you willing to give?" asked a formless voice. Knowing he had no other choice, Lucas offered the only thing he knew that had value: himself. He sacrificed part of his soul, believing that it would save his friends. When he left the hut, the forest was eerily silent. He made it back to the village, but it was no longer the same. The whispers now followed him, and he knew that one day, they would come to claim him completely.